So we just have a few more weeks left, which is kind of fun. So next week, we do not have class. So I know there's a lot of people who are not in class today. Just remember, no class next week. This is a good time for you to look at your grade book and see if you are missing any assignments to get those done. If you have a test or quiz that you missed, um, make sure that you message me and I'll open that up for you. Okay. So I want you to be able to get those done. A couple of you have missed your discussions. Now, your discussions are like an easy 100, and so make sure you get those discussions done. It lets me know when you have done those. And those are, you guys did a great job on these. I love looking at your responses because you do a great job. And it's really neat to be able to get an eye for what you're learning and who these people are. You're getting a little bit more in depth. So, and I think this week was, let me just kind of go back and check. I think it was on, let me see, what was that last week? I think it was on Hezekiah. And we're going to be talking about him today. So, right. Describe Hezekiah's character and his reign, and some of the different things. So we're going to be talking about that today. So welcome for those of you who are watching our recording. Welcome to week 26. We only have 4 more weeks left. And at the end of class, I'm going to give you a special assignment for the last week. So it'll give you a couple weeks to kind of get you thinking about the last week of class. And that's coming up fast. And so I'm kind of excited about this. So, any prayer requests that we have for today? See a few of you typing. I do have a prayer request. When I was gone in Connecticut the past couple weeks, I overdid it a little bit, and so my lower back has been really sore even with my spinal stimulator on. And, I was telling my last class, and we were talking about digestion and, in my health and, anatomy and physiology class, and, one of the things is, like, I can feel all my nerves. So, like, I can actually feel, like, my, small intestine and my large intestine and my stomach. You can feel everything moving and how those organs are, where they're at. You can feel all that inside of you. And it's kind of strange, but and it's kind of weird at the same time, just to be able to do that. But like I had to turn up uh, my spinal stimulator, and so it's causing me to feel everything a little bit more intensely. So that's kind of interesting. Some of the strange things that happen, but it's good, that I've been able to have that to help with back pain. But yeah, I'm just a little sore there, and I can just kind of feel everything else. Okay, so you got to finish up some work. Yes, it's graduation year, so probably are you going to be ready to graduate when class is done? That's 5 weeks away. Hopefully. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, we're going to pray hard that you get everything done and you're ready. Do you have a graduation ceremony? We always had graduation ceremonies with our homeschool group locally. Okay, awesome. And so my kids all graduated with the other kids that they homeschooled along with over the years, and that was fun. And even though like one of my children just didn't want to do it. Oh my goodness, she was so shy and she didn't want to do it. And I said it's just it'll be fun. I said let's just try it, see if, let's go through some of the activities, getting ready for graduation. And she finally realized that there were some other people that, she didn't realize that she was graduating at the same year as they were. And so it made it a little bit better. So just going to the different activities and getting ready to graduate, I think she got excited about it. And so, she enjoyed that. And you're getting your senior pictures taken. Oh, how much fun. Okay, so we'll just keep Savannah in prayer here today. All right. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for today and for all that you've done for us. I thank you for this time that we can gather together and learn more about history and the Bible and how they coincide. And Lord, I ask that you would just be with each one of us as we have work that we're trying to get done and trying to use our time wisely. We ask that you be with Savannah as she's preparing to graduate, that you would help her to be able to finish all of her classes and help her as she gets her senior photos taken here soon. I just ask that you would just be with her with all of this that's coming up, and it's kind of joy and excitement and a little bit of maybe some hesitation too with everything that's happening. And I just pray that you would just help her there. And Lord, I ask that you would just be with each one of us as we go about our day today, that we would find a way to be a blessing to someone, and that we would honor you in all that we do. We pray these things in your name. Amen. And I hope that you will try to honor God in all that you do as you go about your day. Um, the most important thing that we can do. And I know I don't always do that. I try. And sometimes I do well, and sometimes I fail. And when we fail, we ask God's forgiveness, and we start back over again, and we try again. And I think that's the best that we can do. And I hope that you will do that. Okay, let's go to our game, and let's see how well we remember everything. Oops, wrong thing. Here we go. Okay, so everybody's in there. All right, let's see how we do today. Okay, so I'm thinking we have 15 questions, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, just 10. Okay. Took over after Hatshepsut. Was that Thutmose the first in red, Thutmose the second in blue, Thutmose the third in yellow, or Amenhotep in green? And the correct answer is Thutmose the third. Okay. All right. So Savannah got that one. Number two, the tallest of his bloodline, even representing himself performing feats of strength and skill. Was that Amenhotep the first in red, Thutmose the second in blue, Thutmose the third in yellow, or Amenhotep the second in green? And the correct answer is Amenhotep the second. And we talked about how, he thought he was so tall, and he was only 5'6". He was kind of short, but he was the tallest. True or false? The great archer Amenhotep the first. Is that true in blue, or is that false in red? And that is false. Very good. Okay. All right. So Maeve, you got on the board now. Number 4, true or false? Shishak of Egypt was most likely Thutmose the third. Is that true in blue, or is that false in red? And that is true. Very good. Okay. Let's see. All right. So, Savannah, you're in the lead. Number 5, removed all the foreign altars and commanded Judah to seek the Lord. Was that Asa in red, Abijah in blue, Jeroboam in yellow, or Rehoboam in green? And it was Asa. Okay. All right. I know some of these you're probably going, wow, I gotta remember all this stuff. Number 6, Amenhotep II was conquered by King Asa in red, King Abijah in blue, King Jeroboam in yellow, or King Rehoboam in green? And it was King Asa. Good job. All right. Okay. Savannah, you're doing really well there. Number 7, true or false? The tomb of Amenhotep II is famous for holding the pharaoh's original mummy and having a red quartzite sarcophagus. Is that true in blue, or is that false in red? And that is true. Very good. Okay. All right, number 8, dreamed that the god Horus asked him to free the Sphinx of sand and he would become Pharaoh. Was that Thutmose the third in red, Thutmose the fourth in blue, Pinujum it's the second, or Amenhotep the second in green? Whew, those are some tough words to say. All right, it was Thutmose the fourth. All right, very good. Okay, number 9, Armana letters. Were those love letters in red, peace treaty in blue, or diplomatic letters in yellow? And oh, wow, we had one for each. Diplomatic letters were the correct answer there. All right. Good job, Marissa. Okay. Last question. Known to have more than 1,000 wives in his harem, was that Amenhotep the first in red, Amenhotep the second in blue, or Amenhotep the third in yellow? And it was actually the third, so nobody got that one. All right. Let's see how we did. In third place, we have Marissa. And in second place, we have Maeve, and in first place, that leaves Savannah. Great job, Savannah. You were almost over 1,500 points ahead of everybody. Wonderful job. Okay, those were some tough questions. So good job, guys or ladies, I should say. Okay. These are some of these are hard, aren't they? So when we start learning some of these, they can be a little bit difficult. I was just going over our slides for like this week and next the next time we meet, and I'm kind of excited because they're a little bit more exciting. Some of these are harder to get through, because there's like so many, their names are so similar, and just trying to remember them. So taking good notes really does help. All right, so we're talking about Akhenaten and Nefertiti. All right, she was known as Nefertiti the Beautiful. Sometimes, when we take a look at all of her statues, she looked beautiful. She was just a very beautiful woman, and we of course we have to go by these statues to see what they look like. It would be kind of interesting to see what they look like in real life. They didn't have photographs like we have, so they had to do everything in stone. And so we just have to go by their statues to see what they look like. But when we go back in history, some of these stone and marble busts of people were just amazing, and they did look like who they were. So I'm hoping that they'd worked also. So we've got Eknaton and Nefertiti, and they were a very powerful couple in Egypt. And they reigned for about from 1353 to 1336. Um, and they were known for doing a lot of things together, okay, because their photos or their inscriptions are on a lot of things. They had radical religious reforms during that time. They went from um, uh, polytheistic religious area where there were many gods and went into a monotheistic religion in their country, meaning worshiping one god, and that was Aten or Aten. And Nefertiti was not only just a queen, but she is depicted along with her husband on lots of the paintings and sculptures. So she must have had an important role in working alongside her husband, because very rarely do we see this happening. So this was really kind of interesting. So they were very powerful during the 14th century BC, and they were a royal couple that revolutionized their country. They started worshiping one god in their country, and that was the sun god. You can see it in this picture down below. So it was a monotheistic uh, religion where they just worshipped Aten, and they moved their capital to from Thebes right down here to Amarna. And during this time, there was a lot of wealth in Egypt. And so this is a well known time. No war, we see that the countries flourish. So when there's no war, the men are not at battle, they're at home. And so we see a lot of arts and sciences flourish during this time in every era. Okay, so we see this all throughout history in every country. Okay, so there was no war, there was a lot of peace, there was a lot of wealth, and there was a lot of art that was being not only performed but created. And so we see that the country was growing during this time in Egypt. Now, a lot of the major cities were all located along the Nile River. Okay. And, it just makes sense. This was the main river, the main source of water for their country. So they built their cities around the water. And this is where they had their food. This is where they had um, their fertile lands, because most of this area is in the west was all desert area. So to have the fertile lands, you needed water, for the trees and the flowers and the fields to be able to produce. This is where they wanted to settle. So their larger towns were located in this area. So we have Cairo, Luxor, which was ancient Thebes. Okay, so this is where right here. This is where Thebes was at that one time. And then we see Aswan, Giza, Minya, Asut, Sohag, Cana, Edfu, and Komombo. So this is where lots of large cities were. There was also a lot of smaller towns, a lot of agricultural villages were around this area along the banks because they needed the water. Okay, they also at this time had built trenches to water their fields, and irrigation systems. And they were also known for, some of the cities we even see irrigation systems bringing water into the city for. They would collect water like in ponds, in areas where they had water inside the city. And then we see that they some of the cities had water that was available to them for bathing and different things like that. So they had like a water system, like an aquifer system. We see in Rome, they built an aquifer system and they actually had running toilets back in these ancient times, which is, we think, oh, how did they, do that? A lot of people think that that's a modern invention, but that was around then. It was amazing what they were able to do. And so they built these cities along the Nile River, and this is where the cities were able to flourish. Here's a picture of Nefertiti, and you can see what a beautiful bust it is of her. You can see just beautiful, she was just a beautiful woman. And she was known as being an icon of beauty and feminine power. And so she had a very unique crown. This is blue, and it's really kind of neat, because they would paint these according to what they would wear. And even though the paint has dulled over thousands of years, you can still see it when it's clean that it was a bright blue, just a vivid blue. And she was known as the great royal wife. And she was really central in getting Egypt away from polytheism into a monotheistic society. And so their leaders were very important in this. And they began as a whole. Egypt began worshiping Aten, which is the sun disk, the sun god. Okay, and at many points they were worshiping everything and anything that moved. There were so many gods that they would worship. So Nefertiti is often portrayed in the like the hieroglyphic writings and the pictures as having an important role, almost as important as the king. Okay, she was driving chariots. We think of, that would probably not be the custom of the day back then. It just seems like that wouldn't be what we would think of during that time. She took part in performing ceremonies, and there are pictures of her even smiting her enemies. And that was just usually portrayed of the pharaohs doing that. A lot of people think that she may have assumed the role as co-regent under the name of Neferneferutin toward the end of Akhenaten's reign. Okay, and she moved to the capital with her husband to Amarna, and this is where they see a drastic shift in the religious aspects of the country, going from a polytheistic um, country to a monotheistic country. And then we also see that art flourish during this time. And so we see some different changes in the artistic um, quality during this time. Now they had 6 daughters, and one of them, was and I'm gonna butcher her name, Akhenaten, and she married Tutankhamun. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So one of their daughters 6 daughters, so they had a huge family. Here we see some of the different busts that they started making of, Nefertiti, and we can see where, maybe one had been damaged, and so they started another one. And so we see several in different stages until we see one that is whole. And so some of them were rejected, maybe because of how they were, maybe the stones just fell apart, and we see that they were, until they got one that was somewhat perfect for her. And so she was very powerful. And we can see that she helped with the ruling of Egypt during this time from all the 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 pictographs and the hieroglyphics that we see. So this is Amenhotep the Fourth. Um, he was later known as Akhenaten, and he is known for his religious reforms and his introduction to Atenism, where they worshipped the sun god Aten. And this was their sole deity now in Egypt. Okay, so I kind of wonder, did everybody go along with that, or were they fine with that, or were they so used to worshiping their other gods? So this was a big change for the country, and so there was a shift in the way art was right now, and the architecture was a little bit different. And then they moved the capital city of Egypt, and they moved to a new location, and they called it Akhenaten, and so they moved it from Thebes. Now, Akhenaten's city uh, was known for the horizon of Aten, and it was kind of a short-lived capital. They were only in this area for just a few years. This would be where the city Amarna is today. All right, and it's on the east bank of the Nile River. And this was a city that was built around the worshiping of their sun god Aten. And it was founded by Pharaoh Akhenaten by his 5th year of reign. I was to say some of these names, and they're kind of tough to say. And the city was rapidly constructed, okay? And it was mostly open, okay? So the temples were all open. Notice that you see this big open temple. You can see over here these gates going in, and you can see very large gates, but everything is open here. And you can see here large gates going into the temple, and everything's open, and then some buildings off to the side. So here they have these large temples. Okay. And they were characterized by being open, and they had some stone art around them called Talatat. And the city was known as the Great Temple of Aten. And the small Aten Temple, the Royal Palace, and the Royal Road and the North Palace were in the city. And the city was abandoned shortly after Akhenaten's death, and it was just kind of dismantled by other rulers. The different parts of the building were taken for being used in other building projects, and it eventually just kind of fell apart. And so it's being researched again, and so there it's a historical dig site now. And so shortly after his death, everything returned back to the traditional religious practices. So people went back to worshiping their other gods. And so right now, this area is called Tel Al Amarna, and it's called the Amarna Project, and it is an archaeological dig. And so you can see here today, this is where they have a map of what everything, where it was laid out, and you can see the different parts of where it would have been laid out. And this is kind of what it started with, just these broken down pieces of walls. And so today we are looking through it. We are going through it, and this is a big archaeological dig. What can we find? And so this is kind of somewhat new. And so here we can see this is one of the temples to Aten, and it was the small temple facing west. And you can see the columns there in the sanctuary. And so you can see where the walls may would have been all the way around. You can see very straight walls, okay, but they're digging all the way through here, and you can see several areas where they're digging and just trying to learn about this area and the people and what they were like during this time. So now Nefertiti, let's talk about her. Here we see a picture of both of them sitting, and then we see their children sitting on their lap. Remember, they had six children. And so Nefertiti, her name translates to a beautiful woman has come. Now, we don't know who her parents may have been, but they believe that she may have been a princess from Syria or Mitanni. And there's some evidence that suggests that she was an Egyptian born daughter of a courtier, um, I, and the brother of Akhenaten's mother, T. And although we don't know her parentage for sure, we do know that she had a younger sister named Mutnajmet. Those are some really interesting names. Ooh, it's getting dark here. So Mutbenret is believed to have been a noblewoman of the Amarna court, and she was very closely connected to Nefertiti, and some people believe that she may have been her sister. And we don't, one of those where we don't know for sure, but she's not depicted as being someone who's royal, and she doesn't hold any titles, but she often appears in scenes with the royal family. So, especially with Nefertiti. So, it may be that she would be one of the inscriptions says that sister of the great royal wife. So we don't know if she was, if this is what she was, or there's no definite uh knowledge of her being the true sister of Nefertiti, but we do know that she was depicted alongside them all the time. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at these things, because we're looking at pictures and some little scribbling, which is hieroglyphics, and we try to figure out the past. And it's kind of fun. It's a puzzle trying to figure out some of these things. And we're still digging up information today, which is, always amazing that we're able to do that. So, as a pharaoh, Akhenaten is noted for abandoning the traditional worshiping and bringing it back to Atenism, which is the worship of Aten. And he was the solar deity, meaning the sun god. And you can see this in a lot of the pictorials of them. And you can see this one, she's got one of her daughters on her lap. So, it doesn't look like a baby. They look kind of odd. In fact, this is one of the things they said about the art. The art shows that their bodies are kind of distorted, like their bellies are big and their faces are elongated. And you can notice that, in the pharaoh, his belly is a little enlarged. And here we got one of the children, one of the daughters. They're often shown as a very loving couple and loving their children. So that's one good thing that we know about them. We do know that Akhenaten's love for Nefertiti was very profound, because we see them in a lot of the statues and the pictures as holding hands and showing affection. and equality with each other, sharing a purpose together with their life and their marriage. So they must have been in love with each other to show that much affection even in their statues and different things. So their love for each other kind of shows even today. And so that's kind of neat. And when we see their art and it depicts them holding hands and sometimes kissing and sharing private moments like taking care of their children. So these are all carved on the walls in Tel Armana. And these often describe, there's often like love letters that are described to her, showing his devotion to her. Phrases like, I am from her and she is from me, and saying that she is a light in his heart. So those were some beautiful terms of love and devotion that he showed her. So they didn't just, um, weren't, like a lot of the marriages prearranged or, they were from family members. This was a true loving relationship. And they also had the same vision for Egypt. And so they were quite the pair. And so when they came out as this powerful couple worshiping one God, it changed the country. And Nefertiti was very powerful, and she appears alongside her husband, having the same authority and powers, being equal, the same height. Okay. So they were equal in all matters. So that it basically showed that she was very powerful too. And so that's really kind of neat. So we have Akhenaten's and Nefertiti. Um, they had 6 daughters, so no son. Their daughters were Meritaten, Meketaten, Akhenaten, Nefernaten, Tesheret, Neferu, and Setapenri. And try saying that. I mean, calling all your children and saying all those names so fast. I know I'm saying them wrong, but we're trying here. So after the reign of Akhenaten, um, and Queen Nefertiti, we see that the dynasty after their dynasty, it became unstable. And we see that the following period, the throne was passed down to Smenkare, and the famous boy king Tutankhamun. Okay, so that was the next ruler. So Akhenaten was followed by his father, Amenhotep III, to the throne, or followed his father to the throne, and he succeeded his father around 353 to 351 BC. And he reigned during the 18th dynasty as the pharaoh, and he was crowned by his father. And he reigned alongside with his father as co-regent for about 8 years. And once his father died, he began to create his new views on religion. And within his first year of reign, he enacted that everyone was to worship just the sun god. And like his grandfather and his father had worshiped Aten, um, he wanted everyone else to just worship Aten. And so he had this to be his preference above all the other gods. And he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, which means service to Aten. And so he changed his name from Amun is satisfied to the service of Aten. So he changed his name to reflect that he worshipped only Aten. Okay, so his birth name was Amenhotep the Fourth, and he changed his name to Akhenaten during his reign in Egypt. And his name change shifted with his religious beliefs, and he began promoting Aten as the sun disk, and they established their new capital city in Amarna, and the new name where Amarna is today, and the name of the city was Akhenaten, which means horizon of the Aten. So they named the city after worshiping their sun god also. Okay, so this is also known as Amarna today. Okay, and when it was the capital city of ancient Egypt, um, that was around 1353 to 1336, somewhere around there. Today it's known as Amarna, and there was a palace there, a temple, public gardens, a sacred lake, and private houses. So we can see that they made sure that this city was beautiful, but it wasn't there for very long. As soon as they died, or Akhenaten died, this city was went to pieces. Basically, building parts were taken for other projects, and the city was abandoned. So it changed very quickly. So he built his city within 6 years, and he began to persecute those who continued to worship Amun. And he tried to destroy their temples. He defaced the inscriptions and had the statues smashed. Not him personally, but his government. And they promoted Aten as the sole god, and some of the temples were rebuilt or adapted afterwards. Many of them were dismantled and their materials were reused, just like the city was after his death. And they also included Thebes as the new capital after his death. So they changed the capital back. So we see that during this time, art was just a little bit different, and so we see, like, with his statues, he's kind of given like a long head and some thick lips. His cheeks kind of go in, they're like they're pinched, and he has a large abdomen and thick thighs. Okay, so they're kind of, you know, shapely, and so they show this with everybody. So, this odd body shape. And so I don't know if it was the the way they drew things in the day, but they show everybody like that. So it kind of is an interesting look to the art that was there at that time. So these are the Amarna letters. This is what it looks like, and we look at that and go, I can't decipher that, and it's kind of interesting, but there's like 350 of these cuneiform clay tablets. And this is the where you have your diplomatic correspondence going back and forth between Pharaoh Akhenaten and the Near East rulers. And this was discovered in 1887 at Tel El Amarna. And these documents discuss the different trade matters, military matters, and different peace treaties or alliances between these countries. So, there's a lot of information that they're going back and forth with. And it's kind of interesting, they didn't have letters like we have today. Their letters were on stone tablets. And so kind of interesting when we look at different things like that. So he was married to Nefertiti, had 6 daughters. We know that he was very brilliant and innovative. He actually wrote in hieroglyphs, and he wrote a lot of hymns to Aten. So, he was very uh I guess scholar, he had a lot of education. He could read the hieroglyphs, which not many people could do. He had this great ability to write like hymns and poems. So he was very scholarly. He was not one of the leaders that went to war like a lot of the other pharaohs that we've read about. So just a little bit different than some of the other people that we've talked about. So we talk about their art. We can see that the pictures are depicted with a right and a left hand instead of two left hands, as was previously done in the hieroglyphs. And this was applied only to the royalty, and all the other citizens still had two left hands and two left feet. So if you look at the hieroglyphs, you see two left hands and two left feet, but with the royalty, we see both. So it's kind of interesting. And then we see that He wrote, "My heart is pleased with the queen and her children. May old age be granted to the great queen Nefertiti, and my old age be granted to her children." So you can see that he loved her very much. Okay. We also know that he loved his family and his daughters. We see sculptures of his daughters sitting on his knees. Year 12 of his reign was the last time his family is shown together. They believe that possibly he had lost 3 of his daughters by this time. And we can see that, in certain time periods, different diseases would have killed a lot of the family members off very quickly. And we see that depicted, in a lot of these different pictures here. Okay. We see that he worshiped Aten. Before, they also worshiped other gods. There were clay figures of serpents that they would worship, and there were other gods that they worshiped. We talked about the scarabs and the Sphinx and different things like that. So there were lots of other gods that they had worshipped before. They worshipped the moon, the sun. They worshipped these different animals and different insects and all sorts of things, so there were a lot of different gods that they had worshiped. Okay, let's stop right here. Okay. All right, let's come on back here. All right, so we see in December of 1912, the Germans had discovered the head or the bust of Nefertiti, and they didn't let the Egyptians know that they had found it until 1924. And the Egyptians were outraged and they demanded that it be turned back to them. And even today, the Germans were actually told that they weren't able to dig in Egypt. And it went on for many years. And I think it was in the 80s or 90s they were given permission to come back. But Nefertiti is still in Berlin and the Egyptians still want her back. So, and you find it, like how these countries and even like we have some in England, there's a lot of countries that have artifacts of them and they should belong to the Egyptians. They should be, like we could probably have them on loan, but they should belong to that country. These are their artifacts. And personally, I feel like they should be given back. But you can see right here just a beautiful statue of her. She was just a very beautiful woman. And hopefully her inner beauty was just as much as her outer beauty because we see that she had a loving relationship with her husband and loved her children very much. And there was Akhenaten wrote that on her stela that she was fair of face and joyous with the double plume, mistress of happiness, endowed with favor at hearing whose voice one rejoices, a lady of grace, great of love, whose disposition cheers the Lord of the two lands. So we don't know when she died or how she died because there's no record of her death. But we can see that, it seems like she was, beautiful inside and out. But the one horrible thing there is that she didn't love the one true God. She worshipped Amen and or Aten, and we can see that that was the one big thing that was wrong here. We see that after Akhenaten's death, that his city was abandoned and the stones were used for other buildings. And we see that there's still kind of a foundations left. But the rest of the city is really in ruins. And we're looking at that today to see what we can find. The next king was the boy king Tutankhamun, and he is probably one of the most well-known pharaohs. He was young, okay, and but what he left behind is immaculate. Okay, so he ruled from around 1332 to 1323 BC, and he was known mostly for his tomb. because it was so well preserved and there were so many treasures in it. And this gives us a great insight into Egyptian history to see these relics. A lot of these things had been taken by tomb raiders over the years, but Tutankhamun's tomb had been buried, and tomb robbers did not get in and steal all of his things. So this was a great find for us, for the world. And so it gives us a lot of insight into what Egypt was really like. We see that around 1922, when his tomb was found, the whole world knew about it. They were just, it was just so exciting because there was so much that was there for us to see. We're still looking at all the things today. So we see that he was a son of Akhenaten and his wife Kia. He was about 9 years old when he was crowned king. And so he had advisors that would tell him what to do. And they had told him to change the religion back to Amun. And his third year of reign, he changed his name to Tutankhamun, which means beautiful in life is Amun. So he changed his name to show that he worshiped Amun. He moved the main city back to Luxor, and he married Akhenaten's surviving daughter, Ankhesenpatan. Ankhesenpatan. And she changed her name to Akhenaten, which means she lives for Amun. And we know that they had two stillborn children because of what was left in their tomb. And not much is really known about his life. We did see that from his skeleton. We do know that he was probably about 19 years old when he died, probably from an infection, and that we he had a hunting dog that he really loved. So, you know, probably much like most of us, just, have a dog that he loves. We might have a pet that we love, and but not much else is really known about him. He still wasn't mature enough to really leave a name for himself. But really the name that was left for him is what was left behind. So we see that his grave was covered by a bunch of stones and debris that had fallen when some grave robbers had plundered Ramses the sixth grave. And so his grave was hidden until around 1922, and it was found by Howard Carter. And Carter was sponsored by Lord Carnarvon. And he had found, I mean, look at how immaculate this tomb is. Look at how, I mean, shiny the gold casket is and everything. It just beautiful. And over the years, I've seen some of the things on tour, and it was just amazing. So when they unveiled Tutankhamun, they found that it wasn't they weren't very delicate in keeping his body preserved. Okay. They probably weren't, they didn't know, they didn't have the technology that we know today where we could scan their bodies and possibly see how they died. But they tore off the bandages because underneath the bandages were lots of jewelry that was left in there. And so to get the bracelets off of his arm, they actually tore his arm out of its socket, and they detached his head so they could get the necklaces off. And they put his tomb or his corpse in the sun to melt the resin. They cover their bodies in resin, which is kind of like a wax. And it made him like kind of stick. Resin is kind of like what comes out of trees, but like the sap. And it was very waxy and sticky, and he had kind of stuck into the coffin. So they put it out in the sun and didn't preserve it very well. But inside the tomb, they had 150 pieces of jewelry, and there were about 2,000 different objects that were inside the burial chamber, and about 5,000 artifacts. And there was a large wall of gold found at the entrance, and there was a box that opened into another box and into another box. So there were four boxes all total. The fourth box held his sarcophagus, and the inner coffin was solid gold, and it weighed 242 pounds. And the tomb was just immaculate because nobody had been inside there. The grave robbers did not realize what they had missed. And so everything was just amazing. And so here I'm going to show you a few pictures of some of the things that were actually in the tomb. So this is a pectoral belonging to Tutankhamun, and you can still see the bright colors on there. You think about this, a couple thousand years old, and it's been in this tomb, and it's still in just beautiful condition. I know, isn't that just beautiful? Look at the scarab at the top and the just that bright blue. This is kind of the color of Nefertiti's crown. So they use that brilliant blue there. And so you could see just the bright colors that they used, the gold that was found. This is one of the golden shrines. This is in display in an Egyptian museum, so you can see it. So here is one of the golden boxes that, like we just talked about all the different golden boxes that were there until you got to the sarcophagus. Here were some of the knives that were there, still sharp. They hadn't rusted or decayed, and you could see their golden sheaths. So they were just in beautiful shape. This right here is some sort of a game. You can see like the little this like game pieces up on the top. And so we're not sure what kind of game, but we could tell that it was some sort of game because there were pieces to be moved. These were some golden slippers. So they probably weren't worn, but they were just more display pieces. I can't imagine wearing golden slippers. There would be no movement, but I don't know if he put them on or anything, if it was for, like when he was, in on his throne or something, but nothing really, I would think, to walk on. This is one of the chariots that was in there. And just look at the gold on that. It's just beautiful. And just in such great shape for being several thousand years old. Just amazing. And here is an Anubis statue that was crafted from wood and gold. So you can see the gold in his ears and around his collar. And so just beautiful when you think about these things. And here we can see some of the jewelry and the breastplates that he would have worn, and just the bright colors that are there. You can just see I mean, and you look at this is just amazing. But you can see parts of the different things that they worshiped. Like, you can see the different scarabs. And here you see the wings when they would talk about some of their gods that they would worship having wings. So here's another scarab here. And then there's the snake that they would worship, so there was different gods that they would worship, and all of that is depicted here. This was be one of his royal cups that he would have used, and it was inscribed with hieroglyphs across the top and along the bottom. And this was made out of ivory, so just something beautiful just to behold. And this would have been one of like the canopic jars where it held some of his organs, and just very ornate. I mean, as you can see, it wasn't just, a very simple jar. It was very beautiful. Here is a like a bed that was there. You can imagine sleeping on a bed like that. That is just amazing, out of gold. Can you imagine doing that? I'm fine with my wooden bed, but that is just amazing. And look at the detail on that. Just gorgeous. Okay, so he died without any children. And he died around 18, 19 years old, leaving his widow, and they didn't have an heir. And there were two mummified fetus found in the tomb. And so they were extremely small. So they knew they had to have been stillborn. And they were believed to be his daughters. If they had survived, they didn't survive long after birth. And so we can see he was just young. His vizier, I, had become the pharaoh, and he ruled for about 4 years before being succeeded by Horemheb. And that had been Tutankhamun's commander in chief. And I had been his senior royal officer for many years. And he may have been the father of Nefertiti, but we're not for sure. And that's because his title was called God's Father, which means that he may have been the father-in-law of Akhenaten. And so, that kind of gives us a little insight, but we're, once again, we're not, that's not for certain. So following Ai's brief reign, Hormeb became the pharaoh, and yeah, that must yeah, they must have been born early or stillborn. Yeah, they're not sure. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. We don't know. And that's where a lot of the scans that we do today could tell a lot about some of those things. So that is really interesting. Um, but we see that there are some historical records that that kind of delegitimize his reign. After Hormizd, his vizier, succeeded him as pharaoh, he became known as Ramses the First. And Ramses the First was the first pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. He had no surviving sons, and he appointed Mesu as his successor. And so that would have been securing the next pharaoh in line. So they weren't just overtaken and somebody else come in succession. So Ramses ruled for 1 year, and then Paramesu became the next successor. Excuse me. Now, we think that the mummy of Ramses the First was stolen from Egypt and put in a private Canadian museum before it was returned. And the mummy's identity is not for certain, but it was most likely that of Ramses the First, based on CT scans and X-rays and the skull measurements, and the radiocarbon dating tests that they did, and as well as the aesthetic interpretations of family members. So, how he looked based on family resemblance. And the mummy's arms were found crossed high. So, they were crossed up really high across his chest. And that was usually reserved for royalty. Until around 600 BC. So it's really neat how they would mummify. They perfected the mummification process, and that process really was not passed down, in written records where people would know how to do that today. People have tried, other people have tried, but they really preserved their mummies so well. Look at this mummy. I mean, he almost looks, his skin is just almost perfect. That is pretty amazing to be able to do something that way. And we have not been able to replicate that. But Seti the First was the son of Ramses the First, and was the founder of the Egyptians' 19th dynasty. And his father's reign was very short, and he came into reign, and he set the pace for an important dynasty, both militarily and culturally. He started a new kingdom and neglected that the new kingdom's neglected empire through numerous campaigns into Syria and Palestine. And there are two stela that describe Seti's campaigns, and both of them were found at Beth Shean in Palestine. And so this is kind of the area what's going on, in the news today. So we're talking about areas where, in the area of everything that's going on today with the war in Israel right now in Iran. So all in this area. And so we're taking a look at what's going in the past and kind of looking at the future of what's going on. So he was known for really getting a very well preserved temple at Abydos, and this was just beautiful. Look at these pillars, just beautifully handcrafted. And so he continued the construction at the Great Hypostyle Hall at Karnak. And the Great Hypostyle Hall is located within the Karnak Temple complex. And this is in Amun Re. And it's one of the most visited monuments in from ancient Egypt that people visit today. So this is probably one of the most famous places, but it's so well preserved today. And you can still see, look on the walls here, you can see the hieroglyphs on the walls over here, and the temple walls just or the columns just stay just in perfect shape today. It's just amazing to see that. So, in the Valley of the Kings, we see that his tomb was also one of the most beautiful and complete tombs, and it was very detailed. Look at the color that's in here. Okay, on the hieroglyphs, all throughout the walls, we see pictures depicting him in his reign. On the ceiling, we see bright blue background with golden stars. And so, very detailed, and just very well preserved. Just amazing to see this. Now, Ramses II was known as Ramses the Great, and he's known for his architectural achievements and his peace treaty with the Hittites. So he commissioned a lot of grand temples and monuments to be created during this time. Peace treaty, during peaceful times, you have a lot of arts and crafts and a lot of building being done. So architecture was really great during this time. He had a lot of temples built at Abu Simbel and at the Ramesseum. And he is also famous for the Battle of Kadesh and the peace treaty that came after that. And this was one of the first recorded peace treaties that we have in history. So it's very well known. Now, Ramses is mentioned in the Bible in Exodus 1:11, and he is known in connection with the Israelites for building cities for the Pharaoh. And many scholars believe that he is associated, that the scholars associate this Ramses with the city of Pi-Ramses built by Ramses II. And he was one of the most powerful pharaohs of ancient Egypt. And here we can see him grabbing his, see if you can see this picture here. You can see him grabbing his enemies by the hair, and you can see they depict him much taller, so he's in charge. And you can see behind him some of the weapons that they had. So we can see that, this is depicted here. Just they try to depict all of the different battle scenes and everything else in their walls, and just it's so cool to be able to see these things. So at the age of 10, Ramses II, who is Ramses the Great, was already involved in military affairs. Okay, so age 10. Okay, so this is one of these, I'm thinking, this rambunctious kid, ready to fight, he's going to war. And he was given the honorary rank of captain in the army at 10. And so, he was probably one of those young men that really wanted to go to battle. He was all about this. Okay. Now, he was going through military training at his age. Now, his rank was probably not a true rank for being 10 years old, but it was a symbolic rank because he was the pharaoh. And being at this young age, he was going through strong military training. And when you go back in history and you look at what they did for military training, they were very strict in what their soldiers, what they would eat, how often they would sleep, how often they would train. So they were very strict in all of this. So, he had a very strict upbringing in the, getting this military training. So you can see the walls are just decorated with all these different scenes of wars and battles, and we could see that they portray him as being very powerful and victorious. And we see him slaying his enemies, and getting spoils from war. We see that he's given a lot of different names and titles, and there's all sorts of cartouches or symbols that are found throughout. Excuse me. Excuse me. All of on these walls that talk about his different titles and his great achievements. Now, Ramses II's victories, especially with the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites, were prominent on these temple walls. And some of them may have been exaggerated because these pharaohs really like to show how wonderful they were. Um, they didn't really talk much about the Hittites' contribution, but we see that when we look at the Hittites. Um, record of what happened. So the battle scenes kind of glorified warfare and the peace treaty between Ramses II and the Hittites. This is one of the oldest peace treaties in the world that we have seen, and it's inscribed on the walls in the Temple of Karnak. So we can see that there today. This is what the temple uh, columns would have looked like. And you can see there's all sorts of depictions on there of different accomplishments of the pharaohs. Now, the Egyptian Hittite peace treaty was known as the Eternal Treaty or the Silver Treaty. And this was between Ramses II of Egypt and Hattusili III of the Hittites. And this was written around 1259 BC. And this is just one of the oldest peace treaties that we know from ancient Near East. And we can see both versions from each party. So we can see what each one of them said. Now, Nefertari is one of the most celebrated queens of the ancient Egypt, along with Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Cleopatra. She was the great royal wife and the favorite wife of Pharaoh Ramses II. And he was the builder of grand monuments and vast tombs and monumental temples. So, he did quite a bit during his reign. Now, Kent Weeks made international headlines when 70 feet below the surface of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, he found the largest and most complicated mausoleum ever discovered, and it was a tomb of Ramses II's sons. Look at how beautiful this is. You can see the artwork on the ceiling, all around the walls. It was just amazing. So, over the years, we've seen quite a few of these digs bring up some just beautiful history of Egypt. And it takes a long time to go through each of these tombs and the artifacts and to be able to decipher the hieroglyphs and to be able to tell the story of each of these people. Here we can see the walkway going into the tomb, and you can see that now this is kind of gold looking lights here, but you can see all along the walls there's inscriptions there that tell about his sons. And inside we see that there were some pots and some different pottery shards. Some are still in great condition, but we can see that there was a lot that was left behind. 1 Kings 14:25 says that tells about a story of the reign of King Rehoboam and an invasion by the Egyptian king Shishak. Now, Shishak is mentioned as the king of Egypt who attacked Jerusalem, and it's believed that Ramses II was King Shishak. Okay. And this is just because of all the depictions of both of them. And a lot of times other countries would call those leaders by a different name. Now, Ramses II had a huge family. It was a little bit different. Okay. He had 100 children. He had 48 sons, or 48 to 50 sons, and 40 to 53 daughters with his multiple wives. His key children were Amun-Her-Kepeshef with Nefertari, the high priest Kamwasat with Isitnofret, and his successor who was Merneptah. So those were some of his children that he's remembered for. So Ramses II, 100 children. How, I can't imagine. So, we know that he had many wives and concubines, but 100 children. Can you imagine the palace that would have been there to house just all of them? That would be just huge to begin with. Yeah, he didn't have to take care of them all the time, but just trying to remember their names. Does your mother ever forget your name when she's calling out everybody? I do that to my kids. I always promised myself I was never going to do that as a mom because it used to drive me crazy when I was a kid. And I still do it, and I try really hard not to. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about because that happens to you at home, right? But here we see there was just some great examples of some interesting information about these these pharaohs and their lives, their relationships with their family, just amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of these because it is you're the only girl and they still get your name wrong. I have a problem because my brother and my son look a lot alike, and I keep calling them by the wrong names. So that's kind of funny to do that. Oh, all R's. Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay, so this week, remember next week we don't have class, but your homework is to read chapter 15 to 17 in Unveiling the Kings. And there's a discussion and there's a quiz. Nothing is due until we come back. So you have 2 weeks to finish that. But do check on your grade book just to see if there's anything that's missing and get that turned in. Okay. Any questions about anything today? No? Okay. All right. Well, I guess I will see you in 2 weeks. I hope that you girls have a wonderful time off. Just enjoy that. And try to take some rest, but get caught up on all of your stuff. I know we're getting close to the end. Oh, you know what? Talking about that, let me see if it's on our homework. I don't think I put it on here. Let me see if it's on this week's homework. No, it's on next week's homework, so or the next time we meet. But let me kind of give this to you, just um, a final presentation. So for our last week of class, okay, our last week of class, what we're going to do is we're going to give everybody a chance to give an oral report, and basically you're going to give a presentation for your final exam. Okay, it's gonna be pretty simple, but it's worth about 100 or worth 100 points. So, if you're not gonna be able to be in class that last week, you're going to record it so we can show it in class, but you're gonna do a presentation that's gonna be anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes long, so you can make, some slides if you like, or you can just talk if you like. And you're going to, choose one of the, different pharaohs that we have talked about. So you're going to list like the dynasties that they were in, and maybe the other biblical characters that were around at the same time, the pyramids or temples that they had built during that time, maybe any battles that they fought. So you can choose any one of the dynasties. So what you can choose is any of the dynasties in our books. So anything from dynasties 1 to 31. So you can choose anything that you want. So I'm sure we probably won't have a lot of you choosing the same thing, but you can just look at, if you want, you can look in your book and maybe decide which pharaoh that you would like to give a report on. Okay, so it can be any one. That's going to be our very last week in class. Okay, so just kind of maybe give you a chance to start thinking about that. All right. I guess that's it for today. And if you have any questions, always ask. And if not, I will see you guys in a couple weeks. And I hope you have a good time.